A young girl runs to her father's side. He's Eogan O'Malley, clan chief, and some say pirate. On this day, he's sailing on a trading expedition to Spain. His daughter has always been an adventurous young lass. Now she wants to sail with her father to far off Spain. Eogan, or Owen in English, tells the girl he can't take her on the long and possibly dangerous trek to Spain. But the fiery redhead is not taking no for an answer. Quickly, her father comes up with the excuse that her long curly hair would get tangled in the ship's rigging. At this news, Grace O'Malley pulls out a knife and cuts off her long hair. This act shamed her father into taking her on the trip. It also earned her the nickname Gran Moala, which translates into Grace the Bald. It's a grand start to the life of a woman who defied tradition and empire. Welcome to History is Criminal. In this week's episode, we travel to the time of the Tudor dynasty, but not to England, instead, Ireland, where we look into the life and times of clan chieftain, pirate queen, Grace O'Malley. With me for this trip in the Wayback Machine is my beautiful wife, the unqualified, unapologetic Kimberly. Are you ready for a tale about a woman who would spend her life refusing to let others tell her what she can or cannot do?
Unqualified and unapologetic, my two best qualities. Thank you very much. And I'm absolutely ready. A pirate queen who refused to be told what to do sounds like my kind of woman. Though I'd probably get seasick halfway through the rebellion.
Born Grain O'Malley, or Grace O'Malley in English, around 1530 in County Mayo, Ireland, her family was the leaders of the Clan O'Malley. The O'Malleys were a seafaring clan who, in addition to trade, collected rent from those who fished in the waters they controlled off the coast of northwest Ireland. They sailed out of Clew Bay near present day Newport and Westport. Their castles faced the sea to protect their holdings from any who dared challenge them. Now, some say the O'Malleys were pirates. While historic evidence is mixed on if they fit the traditional definition of pirates, they did likely board ships to collect their rent. They also likely defended their territory from anyone who attempted to challenge their hold on the waters off northwest Ireland. At the time of Grace's birth, Henry VIII was on the throne of England. He held the title of Lord of Ireland. The Irish clans were allowed a semi form of self government, but as time went on, the Tudors gained more and more control over Ireland.
Basically, her family ran the original CHOA, pay your rent or we'll board your boat. I kind of love that. Also, castles facing the sea, that's commitment to the aesthetic and business model. The O'Malleys were clearly not here to play.
Irish Brehon law, written around the 2nd century AD, granted women equal standing. Legally, a wife was her husband's partner, not his property, so very different than most other places in Europe at the time. There were, however, social norms and mores that women were expected to follow. It seems, though, that Owen O'Malley ignored many of these with his daughter. He encouraged her to live her life as she pleased. She had a solid education, which was very unusual for a girl at a time, speaking Latin, Spanish, French, possibly English, and her native Irish. It's believed that as a young girl, she took part in trading expeditions beyond the one she took to Spain as a young girl. Evidence supports that as a teenager, Grace was becoming a skilled sailor.
So her dad basically looked at those social rules for women and said, yeah, no thanks. I love that. A teenage girl fluent in five languages and running sea routes. Meanwhile, I was just trying to parallel park without crying. Still haven't achieved that. Grace was that girl, century ahead of her time.
Yeah, you beat me to that with the parallel parking.
I knew you were going to say that.
At 16, she married Donald O'Flaherty, the heir to a chiefdom of another seafaring powerful clan. This was a marriage that had the potential to unite two powerful clans controlling much of the waters off the west coast of Ireland. Irish folklore states that even at 16 years old, As a young bride, Grace was already a seasoned sailor whose skills were respected by the O'Flaherty clan. It seems that she and Donal had a good marriage and worked as partners. They had three children: Owen, named for Grace's father; Maeve, her daughter, who was said to be as headstrong as her mother; and Morrow, a hot headed misogynist who often refused to obey his mother and reportedly beat his sister. Morrow reportedly later betrayed the family, causing his mother to turn her back on him for the rest of his life.
16, married and already running sea routes. I can barely remember what I was doing at 16, but it definitely wasn't commanding a fleet. Sounds like she and Donnell actually made a good team, though.
Donnell had expected to be named Lord Laird of Connaught, essentially the governor of his region of Ireland. But in 1564, he was disappointed when a relative was given the title. During this time, the O'Flahertys were fighting with the Joyce clan. In 1565, Donnell was out hunting when he was ambushed by warriors of the Joyce clan. Donnell was killed in what appears to be more of an assassination than a fight. With Donnell gone, the Joyce clan believed that O'Flaherty's stronghold, Castle Kirk, would be easy picking without its lord to lead the defense. The Joyce moved on the castle, but Grace led a counteroffensive that drove the Joyces off. Her counterattack was so fierce that it was compared to a mother hen protecting her nest. This caused the castle to gain the nickname Hen's Castle, a name that it's still called to this day.
I'm just saying, they clearly underestimated the wrong woman. They thought, oh, her husband's gone. This'll be easy. And Grace said, watch me. I love that she defended the castle so fiercely they renamed it after her, Hen's Castle. Though, let's be real, this hen had talons.
She sure did. Grace then returned to her family's land, and several of their Flattery warriors pledged their loyalty to her and followed her to an area controlled by the O'Malley clan. She built or possibly improved, the information is kind of contradictory there, on Clara Island, a castle known as Grenoir's Castle. Her father also died about this time. Now, clan law said leadership could not pass to a woman. The chieftain should have passed to her half brother, but it seems he was passed over in favor of Grace. She now had a small fleet of ships at her command and an army of loyal men, taking the responsibility, power, and title of Lord of the O'Malley clan. One of her primary sources of income was using that fleet to collect tribute from ships sailing and fishing in the waters off Northwest Ireland. This is where she got the title Pirate Queen. With power comes perks. And for Grace, it seems that one perk was finding the men she wanted.
Basically, she looked at the rule that said women couldn't be clan leaders and said, yeah, I'll take it from here. Fleet of ships, loyal crew, and apparently a healthy dating life. Grace really said, I can handle the politics and I pick my own men. Thank you very much. She's the original definition of doing it all.
Now, one day a ship wrecked off the coast, and a sailor washed ashore on the island. After he was nursed to health, Grace took the young sailor as her lover. But as the story goes, it was a short love affair, as her lover, whose name seems to be lost to history, was killed by a rival clan, the McMahons of Blacksod Bay. Grace, fueled by vengeance, she began to hunt down the killers, tracking them to McMahon's stronghold of Duna Castle. Breaching the castle, she had everyone inside put to the sword, killing the murderer herself. From this, she gained another moniker, the Dark Lady of Duna Castle. Her reputation as a dangerous adversary was now cemented across Western Ireland.
That just breaks my heart and also kind of makes me cheer for her. She loses the man she loves, and instead of falling apart, she channels it into absolute fury and justice. Grace didn't just mourn, she made sure nobody ever forgot who they messed with. I can see why people started whispering her name like a warning.
Around 1567, she entered into a trial marriage with Richard Burke. This sometimes is also recorded as Richard Bork. but I'm going to use Burke. Known as Iron Richard because of his family's ironworks. The trial marriages were not uncommon at the time. They allowed for a simple dissolving of the marriage if either party wanted out. This union did give Grace access to a large number of bays and inlets, allowing her to expand her ability to territorially control the sea. According to folklore, after 1 year of marriage, Burke returned home to find his castle doors locks changed and his role as husband canceled.
So Grace entered what they called a trial marriage with Iron Richard, basically a try before you buy kind of deal. 1 year later, he comes back to find the locks in his castle changed, and, well, let's just say his husband duties were officially canceled. Meanwhile, Grace got access to more bays and inlets to expand her sea empire. Classic Grace. Break hearts and build power at the same time.
Now, the actual records here are scant. If she did, then this is a major balling move. I've decided we're done. I'm taking your castle in addition to my own. And if you don't like that, you can take it up with my hundreds of warriors or my navy. Whether she was married or not, she continued to partner with Burke until his death in 1583. But history seems to tell us just who was in charge of that family.
Records are scarce, but Grace really told Burke, I'm done. I'm taking your castle too. Grace ran the show, and everyone else just got to take notes.
They did have one son, Tibbet, called Toby of the Ship. You'll love this story because he was born on one of his mother's ships. Again, Irish folklore tells us that after giving birth, her ship was attacked by Algerian pirates. According to the tale, she was below deck swaddling her newborn when the ship was attacked. Hearing that her men were being defeated, she wrapped the baby in a blanket, grabbed a musket, and went up on deck to rally her men and turn the tide of battle, thus coining the term one tough mother. But it was back home where the real trouble was happening. Elizabeth I had started a policy of divide and conquer in Ireland, turning the clan against clan, and then hoping she could sweep up the pieces for herself. Earl Desmond had made a move to strip the O'Malleys of their power. He arrested Grace and held her for a year, first in Limerick, which is not just a weird type of poetry that you can make dirty, and later in Dublin. She was released in part with the urging of sympathetic English nobles, but that reprieve would be short lived.
This woman gave birth, heard pirates off the bow, and said, hold my baby. Grace wasn't just built different. She was built of cannon fire, salt water, and pure audacity. Most people need 6 weeks to recover from childbirth. She took 6 minutes and went full pirate queen mode.
In 1584, Sir Richard Bingham had been named Lord President of Connacht and had the duty to try and control the various clans. He set his sights on Grace and the O'Malley clan. In 1593, he would write that she was, quote, nurse to all rebellions in the province in the last 40 years. Bingham and Grace were now at war. While Grace was a formidable foe, Bingham had the wealth and power of the English crown behind him. Bingham got the upper hand when he killed Grace's oldest son Owen and captured Tibbet and Morrow and her half brother. They were charged with treason and faced possible execution. Grace was also jailed, but somehow her son in law, Maeve's husband, bartered for her release. It was then that Grace made a historic decision. She would gain the release of her children, brother, and relatives of Burke's that were also being held by the English. Only Grace wouldn't mess around with talking to Bingham. She went straight to Queen Elizabeth. The two women seemed to have a lot in common. Near the same age, they were powerful women in a time when women had few rights. Both had refused to allow men to control them. While Elizabeth was queen of a growing empire, she might have held some envy towards Grace. Elizabeth had never married, in part out of fear she would lose her control of the throne. She had weathered numerous plots attempting to wrestle power away from her. And here was Grace. She was married, had children, not only maintained her power through that, but also grew more powerful. This might have been the reason why Elizabeth agreed to meet with the leader of the clan O'Malley.
Now that's a power move. Grace didn't waste her time begging some middle management man like Bingham. She went straight to the top, queen to queen. And honestly, you just know Elizabeth was intrigued. Like, who is this Irish pirate woman running her own ships, raising babies, and defying empires before breakfast? If mutual respect had a mic, they both just dropped it.
Now, before she could meet with the Queen, Grace had to provide in writing answers to 18 questions. I won't go into those questions, but basically it's stating her case. It was in those writings that Grace laid out the idea that she would stop resisting and even aid Elizabeth in return for the freedom of her family. The meeting was set for September of 1593. There's no lasting written record of the exact conversation that took place. What we do have comes from English written sources and Irish word of mouth. The meeting at Greenwich Palace, the discussion was in Latin because Elizabeth didn't speak Irish, which I guess if you're going to decide you're the Queen of Ireland, you probably should learn the language. And Grace either couldn't or most likely wouldn't speak English. Now, it's hard to believe that with all the trade she had done and all of her dealings with the English, that she wouldn't have learned English. After all, she had learned Spanish and French in order to trade. So I believe this was probably a little more of a power play on her part, refusing to speak the Queen's English. Grace also refused to bow, signaling that she saw herself as equal to the Queen while also refusing to acknowledge Elizabeth's claim to Ireland. Grace also wore a dagger to the meeting, something not permitted in the presence of the Queen. When asked to remove the dagger, she refused. She told Elizabeth that the dagger was for her own self defense, and as long as no one moved against her, the dagger would stay in its sheath. Elizabeth allowed her to keep the dagger. Surrounded by guards, the Queen likely felt very little threat from the 60-plus-year-old O'Malley. It's also possible that Elizabeth might have felt a tinge of respect for this Irish clan leader that seemed so much like herself. In return for freeing her family, Grace pledged 200 men and her fleet to aid Elizabeth in keeping the peace in Ireland. Elizabeth sent word to Bingham in a letter that read in part, now we're using the royal we here, we require you to deal with her sons in our name. Yield to her some maintenance for living the rest of her old years. And this we do right in her favor, as she has showeth herself dutiful. Although she hath in former times lived out of order, she hath confessed the same with assured promise by oath that she will fight our quarrels with the world. So, in short, you need to let her family go. And from this point on, she's on our side. Oh, yeah. And we're going to pay her.
So basically, Elizabeth was like, yeah, Bingham, release her family, stop being dramatic. And by the way, putting her on payroll. Grace went from outlaw to government contractor faster than you can say strategic alliance. Now that's how you turn rebellion into a retirement plan.
Now, Grace would have expected Bingham to make good right away, but Bingham was dragging his feet. It seems that Bingham didn't believe that Grace would uphold her part of the bargain. And in the case of chicken or the egg, Grace did in fact go back on part of the deal. She loaned ships to Hugh O'Neill as he launched a rebellion known as the 9 Years' War. And while some claim that Grace fought in the war herself, there seems to be little evidence to support that. It does seem that she encouraged Tibbet to fight for Elizabeth against O'Neill, who she was giving ships to. It also seems that it was at this time that she had her break with Murrow, as he seems to have somehow betrayed her in all of this. Stories of Grace's life get sketchy after this. Some stories say she worked as a privateer attacking enemies of England. Others say she continued her pirate ways, still collecting tribute from sailors off the Irish west coast. It seems she died sometime around 1603. Many Irish historians have tended to ignore her because of her aid to Elizabeth. They said that she was more interested in her own well being than the Irish struggle for independence. But in the later 20th century, she became more of a symbol for the Irish struggle.
A woman builds an empire, fights pirates, negotiates with a queen, and history can't decide whether to call her a hero or a sellout. Honestly, Grace wasn't worried about anyone's approval. She was too busy rewriting the rules. Centuries later, they finally caught up and realized she wasn't betraying Ireland. She was outsmarting the whole system.
So while history and folklore have become intermixed in the story of Grace O'Malley, we are left with an incomplete but dynamic story of a warrior, pirate queen, and clan chief who stood toe to toe with the leader of the British Empire and didn't blink. Worldhistory.org was a big help in putting together this episode. If you got the time, scroll down to whatever app you're on and leave us a review. Say whatever you want. I like chocolate. It doesn't matter. If you wouldn't mind leaving 5 star, that helps the podcast get noticed so other people can find us. This has been History is Criminal. Come back next week when Kim and I look at the dastardly deeds of one of history's OG crime families, the Borgias. So if you like massively dysfunctional mess and murder, the Borgias are for you. And until then, if you like what you heard, tell a friend. And if not, tell an enemy. Never suffer alone.